Hello everyone and welcome to Tathastu-ICS. My name is Trijya Garg and I am your economy faculty. Today we'll be discussing about real GDP and nominal GDP. It has been in the news in the past 1 year and it is a very important topic of national income. Before beginning this topic and understanding this topic, let's first analyze the previous year questions trend based on national income accounting. Now, if you see, in 2018, there were two questions asked from National Income Accounting and both the type of questions were interrelation. I've already taught you about interrelation type of questions. They are if and then questions. For example, if this happens, then what will happen? So, two topics were GNP and economic development. The question was on this topic and the type of question was interrelation. Then capital formation. Again, this topic was interrelation. Then in 2016, there was a basically term import cover, which was in the news. So they asked about it. It was current news type of question. Then in 2015, they asked trend based question. Basically, the question was what happened in the past 10 years. Basically, what was the trend of GDP in the past 10 years or past 5 years. These are the type of questions that are asked. Then there was another question that was asked in 2013 based on economic growth. I hope you know the difference between economic growth and economic development. If not, I will be teaching you that as well in this series. Interrelation type of question. Then 2013 they asked on national income. It was a concept based question. Then in 2011 they asked on closed economy. Again, that was a concept-based question, and in 2011 again they asked about GDP and PCI, that is per capita income. It was a trend-based question. So we will be discussing all of these questions as well in this series, but today our topic is real GDP and nominal GDP. Before we begin, let's first understand GDP, that is gross domestic product. Earlier what used to happen was, whenever we used to compare the countries based on wealth, which country is the wealthiest country, which country is wealthy, what we used to do was, we used to basically measure the quantity of money a country has, gold and grains that were held in their state treasury. So basically a nation's wealth was at that time described as or defined as the basically quantity of money, gold and grains that were held in the state treasury. Okay, then came Adam Smith, who is our father of economics as well. Adam Smith in 1776, he published his work, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, in which he basically gave the definition of wealth. Okay, so Adam Smith provided a new definition of national wealth. He said that national wealth is basically the total money value of all the goods and services produced within the geographical boundaries of a country during a period of 1 year. Now, what is this? Let me explain to you one by one. First of all, total money value. So, that means rupees, that is the monetary value. Then we have goods and services. Of all the goods and services, and again if I ask here, they are talking about final goods and services. What do you mean by final goods and services? Which means which are ready to be consumed. So, final goods and services which are basically produced. Produced where? Within the geographical boundaries. For example, this is India. So, whatever goods and services are produced in the geographical boundaries of our India in 1 year. What do you mean by 1 year? Basically, they are talking about the financial year. What is our financial year? 1st April to 31st March. So, whatever the goods and services are produced in a geographical boundary of India basically, so they are talking about that, and we will be taking into account the money value of those goods and services. Clear? This is our GDP. GDP means gross domestic product. Gross means that depreciation is included. That is wear and tear. Domestic means the domestic territory. Domestic territory is also known as economic territory. Okay, and product means goods and services both. You must be confused. Normally when we talk about product or when we hear product, the word product, we normally equate it to goods only. But I'll give you an example. If you ever go to LIC's website, you'll see they provide a lot of plans and services. For example, pension services and or insurance services, right? अगर आप देखेंगे वहां पे ऊपर लिखा होगा प्रोडक्ट और प्रोडक्ट के नीचे ये सारी सर्विसेज मेंशन होंगी. So that is another example for you to actually learn that goods and services both make up product. So whenever we are talking about product here, they are talking about goods and services both. So I hope GDP is clear. Now, if you want to actually learn what is GDP and everything, what are the ways to calculate them, what are the ways to measure them, I can explain that to you as well. But today's topic is real and nominal GDP. So today I will be only focusing on the basic term GDP. So अब आपको ये समझना है, अगर मैं आपको बताऊं जितना भी गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज हमारे इस ज्योग्राफिकल बाउंड्री में प्रोड्यूस हुआ है, जितनी भी सर्विसेज चल रही हैं, जितने भी गुड्स प्रोड्यूस हो रहे हैं, ठीक है, हमारे इस बाउंड्री में एंड ऑल्सो 12 नॉटिकल माइल्स तक, ठीक है, हमारे अगर हम बात करें तो वो भी अगर हम इंक्लूड करेंगे वो भी हमारी डोमेस्टिक टेरिटरी में आएगा. ओके, तो ये सारी चीजें अगर हम बात करेंगे, जितना भी प्रोडक्शन हो रहा है एक साल में और जितना वो बेसिकली कंज्यूम हो रहा है यानी सेल हो रहा है, तो उसका मॉनेटरी वैल्यू निकल जाएगा. दैट इज आवर जीडीपी, ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट. नाउ आई कैन गिव यू अनदर एग्जांपल टू एक्चुअली अंडरस्टैंड व्हाई वी कैलकुलेट जीडीपी. ओके, फॉर एग्जांपल लेट्स से देयर आर टू पीपल. देयर इज सिमरन and there is Raj. Okay, now Simran earns around 50,000 rupees per year and Raj earns around 1 lakh rupees per month. Let's say per month. Okay, they're earning this per month. Now when we calculate their 1 year income, okay, so Simran would be earning around 6 lakh rupees per year and Raj would be earning around 12 lakh rupees per year. Right? So who would you say is wealthy? We'll say Raj is wealthy. Similarly, what we do is when we have to compare countries, okay, instead of Raj and Simran, we are comparing different countries. For example, there's US, there's China, there's Pakistan, there's India. Okay. Now, when we are comparing the countries, we need the national income. So basically, there are a lot of people like Raj and Simran who are earning in our country. Right? So what we do is we sum their income together of all the people in our country, and whatever the amount that we get, the total amount that we get, we compare countries based on that. That is your GDP if we measure by income method. Simple. Okay, so basically we need GDP to basically make comparison of different countries, because of which also we can also know about the economic growth in our sectors. Economic growth, when we talk about economic growth, it is quantitative, and when we talk about economic development, that is qualitative and quantitative. Okay, so when we're talking about economic growth, we are basically checking how a country is growing based on GDP, based on per capita income. Okay, now I hope you've understood what is GDP. Now, all of us normally have heard about Adam Smith, who gave the definition of wealth. Now there's another economist, Simon Kuznets, in 1934. Basically, he's an American economist who put forward the idea of GDP. Adam Smith was the one who actually gave the definition of nation's wealth. But Simon Kuznets in 1934, he basically put forward the idea of GDP, that is gross domestic product. And in 1944, at Bretton Woods conference, basically the idea was accepted. It was accepted as the main measure of country's economy. So in 1944, it was accepted that we will be calculating our country's economy with the help of GDP. Now, he said that we can calculate a country's economy at domestic and national level. Domestic means basically whatever is happening within the geographical boundaries of India. National means when we are also basically taking into account the amount of money, goods or services that our people are producing outside somewhere else, but they are residents of our country. Okay. Now also, so there are 4 things, okay, that you have to remember. One is domestic, one is our national, then both of them are calculated at gross and net. When we talk about gross, we are already including depreciation. When we are talking about net, we are not including depreciation. Okay, again, gross and net. What is the difference between domestic and national of NFIA? That is net factor income from abroad. Okay, so whatever money that we get from abroad, our people are earning abroad, our residents are earning abroad, okay, we add that and subtract whatever money other residents of other countries are actually earning in our country. We subtract that. So that is the difference between domestic and national. Okay, and this is the difference between gross, net. Okay, the difference here is of depreciation. So when we want to go towards from gross to net, we subtract depreciation. When we want to go from domestic to national, we add NFIA. I hope this is clear. Okay, so he was the one, Simon Kuznets was the one who actually gave this idea that we can calculate countries' income from 4 concepts: GDP, NDP, GNP and NNP. When we talk about NNP, this is our national income. Okay, NNP, because it is the purest form. Here we have already added NFIA and we have subtracted depreciation. So this is the purest form of country's economy. Okay, country's income. Now, when we talk about national income, it can be calculated, derived at 2 prices. We're talking about prices here. Okay, because obviously we talked about total money value. Total money value means prices. So there are 2 prices. One is constant and the other one is current. Constant means base year. Current means basically जो हम देखते हैं पैकेज पे MRP रखा होता है, that is your current, कि अभी क्या प्राइस चल रहा है, ठीक है. And what is the difference between them? Inflation. Because अगर आप देखो हमारा बेस ईयर क्या है, it is 2011 and 12. It is 2011-12. अब उस टाइम से और अगर अभी से हम कंपेयर करना स्टार्ट करें तो अगर आप देखोगे प्राइसेस कितनी ज्यादा बढ़ चुकी हैं, राइट. एंड व्हेन प्राइसेस हैव इंक्रीज्ड इन दिस स्पैन ऑफ टाइम, इट इज आल्सो नोन एज इन्फ्लेशन, राइट. Because what has happened? The overall prices, general level of prices have increased over a sustained period of time of goods and services, right? So that is inflation. So what is the difference between constant and current prices? Inflation. Now, base year, it is considered standstill, okay, at a past in the case of constant price. So it is considered as a constant price. So we calculate GDP at base year or at constant price, okay, and then we calculate GDP at market price. Now what you have to learn is when we calculate GDP at base year, ठीक है, इसके बारे में अगर हम बात करें, this is our real GDP. Why real? This is also what I will explain you अभी, okay, and this is our nominal GDP. Nominal GDP. Let's begin with nominal GDP. What is nominal GDP? Nominal GDP is basically value of final goods and services produced within the domestic territory of a country at current prices. So imagine, let's consider that, for example, Q amount of goods and services were produced in 1 year, okay, current prices in a year. Okay, Q amount was produced basically in 1 year. Okay, let's talk about financial year 2023 to 24. Okay, so we are talking about financial year 24 here. Let's imagine that Q amount was actually what was done. Q amount was produced in 1 year in this financial year. What we'll do is we'll multiply it by price. Okay, price, what price? Today's price, current price. Okay, what was the price at that point of time? We have calculated it, and this is our nominal GDP. Okay, now when we talk about real GDP, so this is value of final goods and services produced within the domestic territory of a country at constant in a year at constant prices. Okay, at constant prices. Now what here we'll do is, so again we are talking about financial year 24. So this quantity which was produced, okay, we'll talk about this quantity here. The quantity that was produced, the quantity of goods and services that was produced in financial year 24, but we'll multiply it with the price of base year. Okay, price of base year. ठीक है, तो 2011-12 का जो प्राइस था उससे हमने आज की क्वांटिटी से क्या कर दिया, मल्टीप्लाई कर दिया. अब आप खुद सोचिए, ठीक है, अगर हम तब के प्राइस से हम क्या कर रहे हैं, कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं आज का जीडीपी, तो क्या होगा, हमें ये पता चल जाएगा कि एक्चुअल में व्हाट हैज बीन द इंक्रीज इन द प्रोडक्शन लेवल. प्रोडक्शन लेवल में कितना इंक्रीज हुआ है. व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट नॉमिनल जीडीपी, हियर द जीडीपी कैन बी इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय क्वांटिटी आल्सो एंड प्राइस आल्सो. ठीक है, लेकिन when we talk about real GDP, here only we are talking about quantity. How much increase has there been in the quantity produced, basically the production level in our economy. So that is why whenever we calculate the economic growth of our country, we use real GDP. So for example, they have estimated that the real GDP of financial year 24, that is 2023 to 24, will be around 7.3%. 7.3%. So they are calculating it on real GDP. So this is our economic growth. So basically, when we compare the production level to 2011 and 12, basically the base year, we can see that our production level has increased by 7.3%, which is a good number. Who calculates GDP? NSO, that is the National Statistical Office, and it comes under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Okay, so NSO basically calculates our GDP. Okay, calculates and publishes. So 7.3% के around बोल रखा है. Now, how is real GDP and nominal GDP calculated? You also need to do that. अभी क्या difference आ रहा है price का, ठीक है, change in price. Okay, and whenever we talk about changes in price, we are talking about inflation. Okay, so one of the price index I could say is GDP deflator. It is also called GDP price index. Now, one of the price indices is GDP deflator. GDP deflator, basically what they do is they measure the changes in the average price level of goods and services of an economy included in GDP. So basically, if I can say whatever our nominal GDP is, we can divide it by real GDP, or I can also say that GDP deflator can also be written as GDP at current prices divided by GDP at constant prices. What will this give us? This will give us the change in the average. Average means general overall level of the price of goods and services. तो जितना भी goods and services produce हो रहा है हमारी कंट्री में, ठीक है, तो हम उसको कंपेयर करेंगे कांस्टेंट प्राइसेस से, ठीक है, तो हमें पता चल जाएगा प्राइसेस में कितना इंक्रीज हो गया है. दिस इज अनदर वे टू कैलकुलेट इन्फ्लेशन. इट इज वन ऑफ द प्राइस इंडिसेस. ओके, नाउ इट इज द रेशियो ऑफ व्हाट the goods and services and economy produced in a particular year at current prices to that of prices that prevailed during the base year. ठीक है, so we can calculate it as this, or we can nominal GDP upon real GDP into 100. So why is this important? Because it helps us to actually know the increase in domestic product only based on the account of higher prices rather than increase in output. Whenever we are talking about real GDP, we can know how much increase has there been in the output. Whenever we are talking about nominal GDP, it can be because of the output also, it can be because of the price also. ठीक है? So real GDP is, that is why real GDP is very important for us. Okay? Now, if we have to calculate real GDP, what we will do? If we have to calculate real GDP, nominal GDP divided by GDP deflator into 100. This is our formula to calculate real GDP. Because in this point, basically what we are doing is we are adjusting the inflation. In real GDP, we adjust the inflation. We are removing the effect of price. So we are dividing nominal GDP by GDP deflator. And if we have to calculate nominal GDP, then real GDP into GDP deflator divided by 100. This will be our formulas. Okay. So there are certain things that you have to remember. I will make you revise in the end of the lecture. Now let's take an example for you to actually understand. Imagine there is a country, and in that country they are producing 3 goods: cheese, watches and chocolates. The quantity of cheese in 2009 was 10, 5 watches, 4 chocolates. Price was this respectively. So we have taken out the total value of output, that is P into Q or Q into P. And imagine this is our base year as well. Let's assume this is our base year. Okay. So this is our basically 50, 100. This is the total value. And what we have to do for nominal GDP, add all of them. Our value will be 162. And in the base year, our real GDP will also be the same. Okay, because this is our base year, and we calculate basically the quantity with the price of the base year, and because we are assuming this to be the base year, so we are calculating it here. Now when we talk about 2010, for example, the quantity has increased, the production, basically the output, 12, 6, 5, okay, and also the prices have increased. Okay, now we are calculating again the total value of output, 132, 17.5, and our nominal GDP is 215.5. Okay, now here when we calculate real GDP, what we'll do is this quantity will be multiplied by the base year's price. So 12 into 5 is 60, 6 into 20 is 120, 5 into 3 is basically 15. So अगर आप देखेंगे प्राइसेस हमने सेम रखे हैं लेकिन क्वांटिटी चेंज हुई है, तो इससे हमें क्या पता चल जाएगा कि क्वांटिटी कितना इंक्रीज हुआ है, आउटपुट कितना इंक्रीज हुआ है हमारा, अगर हम कंपेयर कर रहे हैं बेस ईयर से और 2010 से. सो अगर आउटपुट बढ़ रहा है, इट मीन्स व्हाट? इट मीन्स दैट प्रोडक्शन इज इंक्रीजिंग, इट मीन्स इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज इन आवर इकोनॉमी इज इंक्रीजिंग, पीपल आर अर्निंग मोर, दे आर स्पेंडिंग मोर, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ एक्सपेंडिचर, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉफिट, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स. ओके, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट. ओके, so अब हमारा real GDP is 195 here. Okay, now we have to calculate GDP deflator for example. So क्या करेंगे हम? Nominal GDP is 215.5 divided by 195 into 100. Okay, and 110, that is your GDP deflator, or we can also say, I think it's around 1.1. Okay, it's around 1.1. Okay, now real GDP of a country can be more, equal or less than nominal GDP. If real GDP is more than nominal GDP, what does this mean? That the GDP deflator where the prices were more, basically, right? That GDP deflator is basically less than 1. Okay? If real GDP is equal to nominal GDP, this means there has been no change in the price. Okay? GDP deflator is equal to 1. If real GDP is less than nominal GDP, this gives us what? That GDP deflator is more than 1. It means the prices have increased as compared to the base year. So this is another thing. Now let's compare real GDP and nominal GDP. It reflects the actual production changes. Real GDP reflects the actual production changes. Why? Because only we are talking about the change in the output level. Because we have adjusted it with the inflation, the price effects. Okay, and it can be nominal GDP. When we talk about nominal GDP, it can be influenced by price changes as well, and not just production. Okay, it can be a situation where the production hasn't increased but the prices have increased, and because of which our nominal GDP seems to be a bit inflated. Okay, periodic comparison. Why real GDP is better? Because we can compare it across different years. Okay, we can compare it with 2011-12, can be compared to 2022, 23, 24, 25 and so on. And nominal GDP can be skewed, a bit skewed by inflation because of the inflation level. Now, when we talk about international comparisons, because they give accurate economic comparisons, because every country has a different inflation level and a nominal GDP can be skewed. So that is why whenever we are comparing the economic growth of different countries, we are basically taking into account the real GDP of every country. Okay. So it is less reliable. Why? Because varying inflation rates of different countries. So that is why real GDP, whenever we are calculating economic growth of any country, we are talking about the real GDP. Okay, now let's revise. When we talk about nominal GDP, monetary value of goods and services based on current year prices. It is adjusted to base year prices. It is GDP without inflation adjustments. It is inflation adjusted GDP. It is in terms of current year prices, in terms of base year or constant prices. It is easy to calculate. It is a bit challenging because inflation, we have to adjust inflation every time. Then typically higher. When we talk about nominal GDP, you will normally see the nominal GDP will be higher than the real GDP due to current market prices, and it will be generally lower. Then when we compare it, okay, it can be compared of different quarters. Basically, we know that our 1 year has quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and our data is released quarter wise. Okay, so when we are talking about nominal GDP, we can compare the data quarter wise. When we are talking about real GDP, we can compare the different financial years. Then economic growth, it is less reliable because it does not account for the inflation effects, and it is a good indicator to actually analyze the economic growth of any country because we are adjusting inflation here. Okay, I hope everything was clear. I hope you've understood real GDP and nominal GDP. Now let's basically try and solve this example. This question. Consider the following statements about gross domestic product. It is the most basic way to assess the performance of any economy. GDP is defined as the total market value of all final goods and services in an economy, and nominal GDP is derived by removing the effect of inflation from the real GDP. How many of the statements given above are not correct? Whenever you're solving a question in your UPSC prelims, okay, always remember to actually circle or underline this word not correct, incorrect or correct, so that your answer is never wrong and you answer accurately. Okay, so let's go by the statements one by one. It is the most basic way to assess the performance of any economy. Yes, whenever we normally calculate the GDP at market prices of every economy to compare countries. GDP is defined as the total market value. Yes, this word total market value is very important because we need the monetary terms. Okay, final is very important of goods and services because we do not include intermediate goods. Okay, so yes, this is correct. Nominal GDP is derived by removing. No, nominal GDP is not inflation adjusted. Nominal GDP is not inflation adjusted. Real GDP is inflation adjusted. So this is wrong. Okay, so our answer is only 1 because they've asked about not correct statement. Okay, so only 1 is wrong. You do not need anything else besides this lecture. to know about real GDP and nominal GDP, and I am confident that you will be able to handle any question that comes from this section. This is your homework. You have to give it a try. Try answering this question and try answering this very correctly, okay, accurately, okay, I must say. You can answer this question in the comment section. You can take a screenshot or you can pause the video. Try answering this question. It is from the same topic only, and I will reply to all of you. And if there's any doubt, again you can ask me in the comment section. I hope this was clear, and I hope your economy is getting better with this lecture series as well. Today was our third lecture. I will be bringing many lectures for you which are important for Prelims 2024. And thank you so much. And if there's any doubt, you can ask me in the comment section. See you in the next lecture. All the best.